What's up, y'all? Welcome to Union Minded. I'm your host, Eric, and today we are going to talk about an update that I received regarding the railroad workers and the railroads negotiations. If you'll recall, in September, there was a tentative agreement that was brokered with the help of President Biden, who then chose to take a blatant victory lap for a job well done. And I warned that on Reddit, the railroad workers were not happy with the TA and they were making that known. And I thought that that was a good indicator that perhaps this is not such a done deal. Politico put out an article on the 11th that I just saw today, and I wanted to share it with you guys. But first, before we get into that, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe button, hit the notification bell, drop some comments, and share these videos. And now that we've gotten that out of the way, here we go. Employment and immigration. Dubious at best. Railroad workers' rejection of new contracts revive strike fears. The threat alone carries hefty political ramifications for Democrats, also grappling with inflation and a possible recession. This is by Eleanor Mueller and Tanya Snyder. Fears of a disruptive rail strike are roaring back to life. Less than a month after President Joe Biden took a highly visible victory lap for averting a pre-election economic meltdown, no strike will happen before the end of the so-called cooling off period in late November after the midterm elections, and negotiations are continuing between the freight railroad industry and a dozen unions, but one labor organization's vote this week to reject a contract with the railroads threatens to undo the White House's efforts to avert a strike. Efforts that included a compromise the administration brokered September 15th. The upshot is that railroads could again be weeks away from a work stoppage that would halt 40% of the nation's freight traffic, imperiling Americans' food, drinking water, and electricity supplies, as well as the holiday shopping season. The strike threat is yet another burden for an economy weighed down by inflation and fears of a recession. Those railroads should really negotiate in good faith with their workers and stop trying to bully ball them. It's also a sign that the Biden administration's work to prevent a strike may have merely delayed it, as rail employees' anger continues to simmer over what they say are onerous, punishing, and even inhumane working conditions. If you know what they're facing, you would agree that they're facing horrible situations. When you're talking about a single person operating a 15,000 foot long train, that's a perilous situation. When you're talking about having to be on call 24 hours a day for 14 days straight, that's a major problem. And these are things that they are facing. The Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees, the nation's third largest rail union, announced Monday that its members had voted down the tentative agreement its leadership reached with the railroads September 10th. Any one of the dozen railroad unions can trigger a strike because none of the others would cross a picket line. That is called solidarity between workers. So one group goes on strike, none of them are going to cross the picket line, and they'll just stand in solidarity until we figure this out. For consumers, the result would be empty shelves and delayed shipments during the time of year they rely on them the most. Passenger rail systems around the country, including many Amtrak routes, were also gearing up to shut down before negotiations, prodded by the Biden administration, yielded a tentative deal in mid-September. Again, this can be averted if the railroads would stop being greedy pigs and would just give the workers a fair deal. These fat cats get bloated salaries, and then they penny pinch everywhere and cut labor in order to save money and increase profits. And all they do is create worse situations for workers. And here you have workers fighting back. I, for one, am with the workers. It's a trade union principle that if a railroad union goes on strike, other railroad unions honor that strike, said Peter Kennedy, who directs strategic coordination and research at BMWE. And at this point, reaching a new tentative agreement seems dubious at best. Others involved in the situation were more cautious, at least publicly. One union's rejection does not mean we face an immediate rail shutdown, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said at Tuesday's briefing. We stand ready to assist at any time, she said, but added that this is not unusual. Clearly, you're not paying attention to what the workers are saying. You're listening to railroaders, and you're not listening to the workers who actually operate the railroads and make the entire thing go. Because if you were, you'd be hearing them saying that solidarity is a main point for them. The White House has devoted considerable power to the effort to find a deal. That included the establishment of a presidentially appointed board of arbiters that earlier this year recommended proposed contract language, which the railroads quickly embraced. The railroads quickly embraced them because they were very advantageous to the railroads and very minimalist at best to the workers, if not outright insulting to the workers. But three unions still had not yet reached a deal ahead of a possible strike deadline last month, prompting Labor Secretary Marty Walsh and other members of Biden's cabinet to help forge an agreement that finally came together in the middle of the night. Biden praised that deal in a Rose Garden celebration as a win for tens of thousands of rail workers. It is not. The contract that BMWE members voted down this week was negotiated prior to that dramatic September 15th meeting and did not include some additional concessions that some unions won at that time. Those other unions have yet to vote on their proposed deal. Any one union that rejects its contract threatens the fragile peace that Biden and his team had helped engineer. Congress retains the ability to intervene if a strike appears imminent, in which case lawmakers could impose the management-embraced recommendations of a presidentially appointed emergency board that weighed in on the dispute earlier this year. Hopefully, Congress won't do that, and they'll allow the negotiations to play out. And yeah, it's going to suck. But how else do we earn ourselves a fair wage for a fair day's work when we can't even use the weapons that we do have, which is withholding our labor? You can't force people to work. The sticking point continues to be not pay, but benefits. Again, this isn't about just greedy workers as those railroads would have you believe. This is about the conditions that they're working under and the benefits that they receive. Amid complaints from railroad workers that the freight industry's drive to cut costs is ruining employees' quality of life through unpredictable scheduling and unrealistic attendance policies. The first round of tentative agreements included just one additional paid day off for workers, when unions had initially pushed for 5. The presidentially appointed emergency board's recommendations did not address the quality of life issues. The number one issue for all of the unions has been time off, said Arthur Wheaton, a Cornell University labor professor and former AFSCME union official, adding that policy was only very minorly tweaked under the deal reached last month. Even after railroads offered some concessions, there's still a very restrictive attendance policy. There's little indication that could change. The International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers District Lodge 19, which voted down its tentative agreement before the White House brokered deal, has already produced a new proposal. Yet none of the changes touch on time off. We've seen no willingness on the part of the railroads to go beyond the recommendations of the presidential board, Kennedy said, and our members are screaming, "Hey, we need paid sick days." 4 unions have voted to ratify so far. At this point, we've had more unions ratify than did not ratify, said Greg Reagan, who heads the AFL-CIO's Transportation Trades Department. While there's certainly a number of workers who are just very angry, others certainly are not 100% thrilled but are satisfied. But results from 6 others are still pending, including 2 of the holdouts that kept negotiators at the Labor Department overnight last month. And some people familiar with the conversations predict that results like BMWE's vote will make it more difficult for the leaders of those to sell the contracts to their members. It's not a good thing when one union fails to ratify a contract that's part of a larger pattern. and calls out an issue that is a very big issue for two other unions that have not yet ratified, former Department of Labor Secretary Seth Harris said. He added that leaders of the Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers Transportation Division and Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, two of the unions that were last to reach tentative agreements, will have some more explaining to do. The rail carriers involved estimate that a strike could cost the U.S. more than $2 billion a day. The rail carriers will cause a cost of $2 billion a day over their greed, and do so just as inflation begins to taper off. Any work stoppage would touch on nearly every facet of American life, risking empty grocery store shelves, starving livestock, coal-less power plants, and drinking water plants without crucial chemicals for eradicating contaminants. Yeah, railroads, what are you doing? Trying to threaten the public? Would you just negotiate in good faith? Give these folks a day off? Give them a week? What are you doing, railroaders? Even this threat of an upcoming strike is enough to really hurt Democrats at the polls for now. Let's stop treating these things as political. These are life and death issues. Because everybody thought this was done. They thought it was over, said Wheaton, the Cornell professor. The White House made a good showing of saying, yeah, look, we solved this problem, we fixed this. But no, they just pushed the can down the road a little bit. And that's what I was saying at the time last month. I said it was way too early to take a victory lap, as workers have not had their say. You got the bosses in a room and the bosses decided what was good. But guess what? The workers still have to say yes or no. That's how unions work, and that's why unions serve to uplift workers. It provides the workers an avenue to negotiate on equal footing. And so I hope, for one, that the workers, if they are not satisfied by their TAs, stand by their beliefs, use their conviction, and vote no on those contracts, and work to get a new contract that's better. And I fully support them in doing that. My name's Eric. You're watching Union Minded. Hope you found this video informative. Don't forget, the fight is not left and right. It is up and down. Always was, always will be. It's going to take solidarity to win always. Each one teach one. Get out there and reach one. Peace.